Hello, I'm Lauren with IndoorGardening.com, and today we're going to talk about how to take care of your Alocasia. Alocasia are known for being very finicky plants. They kind of have a bad reputation out there for being very difficult. It's actually not that difficult to take care of them once you figure out what they actually need. They are a little bit of a conundrum because some of them have very thin, flimsy leaves like the Alocasia Frydek, while others have very thin, hard, succulent-like leaves like an Alocasia Dragon Scale. So it really depends on what you have going on, your environmental conditions and whatnot, and they can be a little bit tricky to figure out. But don't worry, we're going to break down everything today, and that way you'll be able to take care of your Alocasia and keep them alive and thriving and get them out of the one-leaf club. The number one thing you want to do when trying to figure out how to take care of a plant is figure out where they're from. Alocasia were discovered in the 1800s during the Great Orchid Hunt, where a lot of houseplants were discovered. They were discovered in the tropical rainforests of Asia and Australia. So you want to take that in mind when you're figuring out how to care for them. What we know about tropical rainforests is that majority of them are going to be warm, they're going to be very humid places, and depending on the location, you're either going to get a lot of light or a little bit of light, depending on the specific type of plant and where they're located in the forest. Based on that, we can extrapolate the care. Let's talk about humidity first. Alocasia like their high humidity. Because they're from the tropical rainforest, there are all these plants that just have their big leaves and they trap all of this moisture down there. It doesn't really evaporate off. So they're constantly moist. They constantly have moisture around their roots. They constantly have humidity around their base. They constantly have humidity around their foliage. Alocasia like their humidity to be around 80% or so. Any lower than that and they can actually have trouble breathing for themselves, and they can have trouble absorbing those nutrients, which can make them stay smaller or have their foliage get stuck while it's unfurling. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Just try to keep the humidity around 80%, not too much higher, too much lower. In a tropical rainforest, the soil is going to be very, very rich. It's going to have a lot of all the leaves that have fallen down and broken down. It's going to have pieces of the tree bark, other pieces of plant. Everything's going to have fallen and broken down into this very, very rich, moisture-retentive soil. There'll also be moss growing over top and keeping that moisture in there. So having a very rich, well-draining soil mixture is what's going to be key to keeping your Alocasia happy. You want to have things that are naturally going to be found in a rainforest in your soil mixture. Things like bark, sphagnum moss. You can have perlite. Worm castings can mimic the broken down materials as well. They're very moisture retentive, but they're also very rich in nutrients. Just kind of mix all of these together in an even amounts. You don't have to necessarily do equal amounts of every single one, but just try to make sure that if you're going to run water through it, that it's going to come out the bottom. It's not going to all sit there and be a giant puddle. Lighting with Alocasia can be a little bit finicky and a little bit tricky to figure out because the thicker-leaved Alocasia can actually handle more light than the thinner-leaved Alocasia. If you notice any paleness or any brown spots, then the leaves are probably getting just a little bit too much light and you want to pull them back. But Alocasia on their own handled tropical light quite a bit, so being in dark corners in a home is not going to be enough for them. They're going to need more light than that. It just depends on your specific plant and your specific environments, and you'll just have to play with that. But generally, bright indirect light for an indoor home, and if they're outdoors, then you want to put them in a shaded location. Because Alocasia come from the tropics, because Alocasia are grown in rainforests, they actually are constantly having broken down media around them. There are always leaves falling, there's tree bark, there's broken down branches, there's other plants that are dying around them. All of that is becoming compost material, and Alocasia are always constantly getting food. So when they're in our homes, they always need fertilizer. They are heavy feeders. If you do not give them enough food, they will not be able to produce new leaves. Also, if they are not given enough food, then you will notice that they'll start to have a leaf die off, and you'll have another leaf come in, and then the leaf will die off, and then another leaf will come in. They won't have more than 1 or 2 leaves at one time. They'll never be able to sustain it if they don't have that fertilizer. There's just a lot of different things depending on the size of your alocasia, so we can't say give 1 scoop of X fertilizer. It really depends on the size of your plant, how many leaves, where it is in its growth cycle. A mature plant that's trying to flower is going to need more fertilizer than a younger, less mature plant. So it really just depends, but always stick to a fertilization schedule. Do not underestimate the importance of fertilizer. So when you are watering your alocasia, you definitely want to almost let it dry out and then water it. They do not like to be sitting in a puddle, but they do not like to dry out completely. They're in a rainforest, so they constantly have moisture going through the roots. They constantly have humidity around them on a regular basis, but they're not sitting in puddles. They're not sitting in a bog type of thing. They don't like to sit in water. They're actually a bulbous plant, so constantly sitting in water will cause them to rot. So that's where the overwatering kind of comes in, and it's not the amount of water that you're giving them, it's the length of time that they sit in the water that causes the problem. If the roots become mushy and soft, and then it allows root rot diseases in there, then that's going to rot the entire bulb and you won't be able to salvage your plant. So that's something to keep in mind. Just pay attention, water it right before it's all the way dry. Don't let it dry out completely because they can't handle that very well. Alocasia like warmer temperatures. Try not to drop below 70 degrees. They are warmth-loving plants. Even just keeping them close to some type of a space heater while they have a lot of humidity going on can be enough to stimulate them to grow and push out new leaves. They really do love that warmth. So if you can keep them toasty, they will keep growing for you. Alocasia are very prone to spider mites as pests. They don't really seem to get very many other pests, but spider mite seems to be the main thing that they get. And the reason for this is because spider mites like to prey on plants that are struggling. That's how they take them over, because plants have a natural immune system and they can kind of fend off pests, believe it or not. But when a plant is struggling, they're putting all of their energy into fighting off whatever they're struggling, or to preserving their energy, or to pushing out that new leaf when they don't have ideal conditions. So spider mites tend to attack alocasia, especially when they're struggling or have just come over through a change. If you had them outside and brought them inside, if they came from perfect greenhouse conditions into not so perfect home conditions, there's a lot of different reasons as to why your alocasia might be struggling. It could just be you haven't picked up their care as well. There are a lot of different factors, but the spider mites that are in your home will somehow find that alocasia and they will love to be on it. It's pretty easy to treat alocasia with spider mites. You just need to spray them down with an insecticidal soap, and then you can also chop them to the base of the plant and have a whole new plant grow back. As long as the root base is fine, it's not soft and squishy and rotted, you will be perfectly fine, and then the spider mites will leave it alone. In summary, alocasia are not beginner plants. They are not beginner friendly plants. If you have someone just getting into plants and you want them to actually like plants, I would not get them an alocasia. They are very beautiful. They're absolutely stunning plants, but they are quite a bit of work just to figure out what your particular alocasia needs. And once you have that mastered, they are good to go. They will grow prolifically for you and be absolutely gorgeous. They are well worth the time and effort to figure out. They're just not something that we would recommend for a beginner, but hopefully this helps you and makes it a little less intimidating for you. They are definitely well worth it. If you are worried about your alocasia perishing, we actually have a video on how to propagate your alocasia as well. We have a video on how to fight pests. We'll link all those down below for you. Be sure to check out indoorgardening.com where there is more information and we are always happy to help. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!